Right, there are lots of ways to approach this painting, and for this exercise I'm going to approach this leaf with a watercolour pencil. So what I'm going to do is I'm using an alizarin crimson watercolour pencil, and I'm going to be a little bit sneaky and go round it. Why not? Doesn't have to be exact. You can do this with lots of things. Don't make things more difficult than you have to. Of course, it does depend what technique you are after. So we've got the outline. Now if we look at this, we can also see that the veins are quite red. So let us put in a vein, and we have that big point there where there's a vein, and there's another one there roughly, and another one there. Let's put a few more in. They're sort of opposite each vein. Some are, some aren't. Nobody's going to pull you up about it. And sometimes we can see little veins going across, but maybe not in this case. So that's a watercolour pencil. So now what we can do is wet your brush and just activate the watercolour pencil. So there, straight away, you have your leaf. And you can, if you wish, drop other colours in or do all sorts. So that's one way of starting. Continuing with my limited palette, which I said would be alizarin crimson and cadmium yellow and indigo, while this is still wet, I'm dropping some more alizarin crimson in. This stem is a little thick, but we're not going to worry about it. It's really quite red on the tip. Getting some nice little movements, sort of like veins in itself. See how this has dried off quite a bit because the colour's not running as much. Let's just even that out. So it's darker red at the tip. In fact, there's a little green on the end, so we'll probably put that in. I'm going to rinse my brush off, and then I'm going to the cadmium. A little bit too much cadmium there, Nicola. Ooh. Well, we can lift some of that out. Got a hair there. Take a bit more alizarin and mix it in. And then you're getting the orangey colour. Let's take some more alizarin. So you're mixing on the paper. Doesn't matter if you change those points on the leaves. And because it's still damp, it's all still mixing together quite quite nicely. Now I just dipped into the cadmium. I didn't rinse my brush off. Now I'm going back to the alizarin because it's really more red than orange down there. We've lost our veins, but that doesn't matter because we're going to go over them again. And you've got some nice little dots of the yellow showing through there. So you could pick out. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a bit of that there and tentatively put a bit of indigo in. A little bit of water, alizarin, bit of indigo. It's quite a browny colour on the tip. Bit more water. Oops, I've made a mark there, but I'm not worried because it's the colour mixing and the layering I'm more concerned about to show you than a precise painting. More water and just drop that in. And more down here because it's still a bit too orangey in comparison. Right, I'm going to let that dry off. Well, this has dried out rather nicely. The colours are very good, I think. Okay, you've got variation because this is raised, so you've got highlights and it's curved, and the shadows, if we've pressed it quite flat, it's not bad at all. So what I'm going to do with this now is I'm just going to sharpen it up in a few places. What am I going to do? I'm going to, that's actually quite a brown tip on the end, isn't it, there? So I'll just take a bit of cadmium into this very dark colour, extend this, okay, and then it's got a little dark bit on the end. Right, so we could just crispen up the outline, methinks. It's up to you how much you want to do. But it's been a very, well, I hope you found it an interesting exercise because you've just been using those three colours and you've used your watercolour pencil, those of you who have them. Now there's a darker red colour there. So let's go back to the alizarin and just put a bit more there. We'll blend it into that edge there. And some of the yellow that I dropped on has actually stayed. And I'm just going to put some patches of the darker colour because nothing is, you know, even and exact. And it just makes it a little bit more realistic if that is the look you are looking for. I'll just put a point on the end of this because this is far too chunky, in fact. Just sometimes putting the odd really fine line in can make such a difference. Just pulling that, I've smudged it there, so just sort of accentuating that little point there. A little smudge there as well, never mind. Just wet that off. And you can play around with it. You see, I've got a bloom there, which I quite like, but there it is gone. I've smoothed it out. So don't forget, if you just take your time, you can smooth things out. And it's knowing really when the paint will be persuaded and when it won't. The drying time and also the staining quality. I mean, alizarin is pretty strong staining, as is indigo. So you've got to bear these things in mind. Let's just take that up there. Oops, too much water. And I'm going in to just drop, in fact that's not quite right, so we want to just blob it out a bit. There we go. I've just mixed a bit of cadmium in with that, just to give us a few of these little spots. And sometimes if you just dab things off, it just makes it look a bit more smudgy and a bit more natural. Don't like that bit at all, so I'm going all over that with that orangey colour. And I'm going to just take a little bit of cadmium and just do the odd. Let's soften that off a bit. Oh dear, Mr. Bruno has just jumped up. Stay there, please, Bruno. I'm going to just let that bleed in, look. Let's put a bit of shadow under there. Yeah, let it bleed in. That's nice. No. Excuse me a minute. Go on, off you go. Sit there. Sorry, he's in the light of my lamp. Okay, well look, I'm going to call that a day. No, I'm just going to drop a little bit more alizarin in. Dab that off, make it abstract. So there you go. So, watercolour crayon, the alizarin crimson, and then the three colours from the palette, the cadmium yellow, and the alizarin crimson, and the indigo. So have a play around with that and see how you get on.